Hey everyone, it's me Joji, and today we're going to talk about some information about Pokemon TCG Rotation that you should know. Now, if you're an experienced player, you probably already know what to expect with these rotations, but for the newer people, basically we're going to be losing a lot of cards that are very important to the current meta. And those cards are specifically cards that have the F regulation mark on them. Now, those are cards like this Radiant Greninja right here. It does have a F regulation there in the corner, and it is one of the most important cards we're losing, in my opinion. There are a few other ones that we'll talk about in the video that you may find more important, things like maybe Hisuian Heavy Ball or some other supporters out there, but this was one of those cards that I think is probably one of the biggest losses when it comes to post-rotation this year. But like I said, there's a bunch of other cards. It's not just the cards we're going to cover in this video. Anything with an F regulation is essentially getting rotated out, which means you can't use it in official tournament play. And that also goes for like just casual events. Most local card shops and other events will just say, well, they aren't F regulation, so they're not standard legal, which is usually the format most even casual tournaments go with. But hopefully with this video, for those of you that don't know as much about Pokemon TCG, or maybe you're an experienced player and just want to know what to expect for some of the meta decks and how to adjust them, we are going to be covering some examples towards the end of this video. So if you want to check that out, I will cover in a bit all the different chapters that we're going to be covering in this video. And also let me know what you think about this format. It is a little bit different from my usual style of videos, but I did enjoy recording this type of video, so let me know what you think about it down in the comments. With that, let's go ahead and get into the video, and hopefully you learn some new information.
So what we're going to go over in this video are obviously the major cards that we're losing because of rotation, the cards that are actually going to stay usable even though they're rotating out because of their mark on the bottom, some of the major meta decks that are going to get affected because of this rotation, some TCG products that you could probably get for this rotation to prepare for it, and a couple predictions on what we can expect after rotation. Now, there's no easy way to say it, but obviously all the V cards are disappearing. So no more V Max, even though there weren't really that many that were used anyways, and of course the V-Star Pokemon. And there's some really good decks out there that are just losing their main staple, the thing that makes that deck. So unfortunately, those are leaving us in April, which helps us segue into obviously some of the major Pokemon cards we're losing in this rotation. So starting off with Brilliant Stars, we obviously have Arceus V and V-Star, which was a huge staple during the V series of format. Not so much now. Sometimes you'll use it for its V-Star power, but there have been obviously other ways to do that in the form of Forest Sealed Stone, which we'll talk about in a bit. But we obviously get to see things like Lumineon, Raikou, and the Bibarel Industrious Incisors disappear with Brilliant Stars. Honestly, I think the biggest impact from this set we're losing is probably Lumineon V, which is why I show it up here. And it's obviously like a big loss for a lot of decks. There's a lot of decks that we'll see that are losing this card specifically. But another card, moving on to the next set, is Astral Radiance. And obviously you can see here, Radiant Greninja, probably the biggest loss from Astral Radiance. Obviously you have Palkia V and V-Star, Dialga V and V-Star because they were in the Legends Arceus game with the release of their weird origin form. But also we lose things like Luxray V, which is the thing in Snorlax Stall sometimes, and more Pidgeot Control. And then lastly, the Lost Origins, which we're losing all the Lost Zone cards. So if you were a fan of Lost Zone, just way bye-bye, because they're just all gone. There's no more Lost Zone. I don't even think they put anything in Scarlet and Violet to go with Lost Zone. Maybe they did and I'm just forgetting. But it's just all gone. There's no reason to play Lost Zone anymore. And if you're still playing Lost Zone, obviously for tournaments and you're getting points and stuff, go ahead. But probably start practicing with other decks. If you're into, having multiple options, there are a lot of terrestrial decks out there that you might want to try out. But obviously, like I said, Lost Zone cards, we're losing Rotom V, which is a really huge loss to a lot of decks in the EX formats. Pidgeot V for, stall decks. Sometimes in controls, not so much. And then obviously Hisuian Electrode for Klawf. But those are the biggest losses for the first 3 sets we're going to talk about. Now, moving on to the final V set, major V set, because obviously there's 2 more sets here. But major V set, not including these like extra special sets, Silver Tempest, we're obviously losing Regidrago V-Star, which arguably has been one of the most underdog stories in TCG format for this deck. Like, you don't expect Regidrago to come out of nowhere and be a top tier deck. When it first came out, I thought to myself, wow, this might be the Mewtwo and Mew GX tag team all over again. But there weren't any good Dragon-type Pokemon to go with it at the time. But as more cards came out and more Dragon-type Pokemon came out in the Scarlet Violet era, it obviously became a really good deck. And it's sad to see that it's going away after it finally started getting good. Obviously, we're also losing Lugia, which got a new resurgence with the new Regigigas that came out in the latest sets. And then Radiant Alakazam. I didn't even mention any of the other Radiant Pokemon that we're losing, but we're losing like Radiant Sneasler and a bunch of other Radiant Pokemon. Some of them not as impactful, but Radiant Alakazam. I said Greninja earlier. Gardevoir is also another card we're losing. And speaking of Gardevoir, Kirlia. The Refinement line Kirlia is one of the biggest staples for Gardevoir EX, and we're losing that in this rotation as well. But let's move on to the special sets. Let's talk about Radiant Charizard from Pokemon Go. We're losing that. It's a good comeback card, and it's sad that we're losing it. We did talk about Radiance. This is probably one of the more important Radiants, along with Radiant Greninja and Alakazam. We're also losing Zapdos, which helped power up Miraidon and make it hit those numbers it needed to knock out some of those heavy hitters. And then obviously Snorlax Stall is going to be no more. I'm not mad about it. I honestly could care less that Snorlax Stall is rotating out. I'm glad. Look at me. I'm glad. I don't care that it's leaving. All you Stall players, I'm glad you guys don't have a deck anymore. And now, Crown Zenith is kind of this like weird spot because there's not a lot of things that we're losing. Honestly, when I was making the list of all these like major cards, because this doesn't even include all the cards that I put on the list. This is just like the biggest ones I thought were losing for each set. When it came to Crown Zenith, the problem with it is the special set is just reprints. There's nothing really important. The only thing I could think of was the Bidoof, the Carefree Bidoof, because it's probably the ideal Bidoof to play when you played the Bidoof Barrel engine. So, other than that, it's just a bunch of other reprints of the cards that I previously mentioned. So, yeah, let's move on. So, trainer cards, starting off with Brilliant Stars, we're losing things like Sharon's Care, I don't know why I said that. Cynthia's Ambition, Collapse Stadium, and Magma Basin. Those are some of those cards that we see every once in a while in decks, but they do make an impact in them. And while Sharon's Care took a back seat after we got something like Professor Turo's Scenario, it still was a card that was very impactful in the V series and the early Scarlet and Violet era. Cynthia's Ambition is more of a card that went into a lot of like not single prize decks, but like the decks that like were less meta. Maybe you just needed to put a Cynthia because you knew you're going to be getting a lot of knockouts. But yeah, there's a few cards in there that spoke to me about what the biggest losses are for trainer cards in Brilliant Stars. But moving on to Astral Radiance. Hisuian Heavy Ball, probably one of those cards that just you slot it into pretty much any deck you play. It is probably one of the larger losses in trainer cards that we're going to see. Also, Irida. We saw Adaman, but not really. Switch card, Temple Sinnoh. Some really good cards that pretty much you'll see even in some EX decks. We're losing those. We're losing a lot of things that some of the EX cards are using. And you'll notice that a lot of these cards that they're losing for the EX era are utility cards. They get you the cards you need, or the cards you want, or they get you a way to set up your cards. But let's talk about the last one on this slide, Lost Origins. Obviously, again, all the Lost Zone cards are rotating now. No more Lost City, no more Colress's Experiment, Lost Vacuum, Mirage Gate, which it's just unfortunate that we're losing the Lost Zone. Maybe it'll come back, but don't expect any of these cards to become reusable, in my opinion. They're probably going to be reprinting a bunch of new Lost Zone cards afterwards. Other than that, though, we are losing Misfortune Sisters, who has obviously seen a lot of play in control decks. So sorry, control and stall, but you're gone. That's okay. And Thornton actually is also very important in stall and a few other like single prize decks where you have to switch in Pokemon. We've seen it a bit in Archaludon EX. I think we've even seen it in Klawf, but I've seen it a lot more in control decks. Moving on to Silver Tempest. Now, the biggest thing we're losing from here in terms of trainer cards is obviously Forest Sealed Stone. One of those cards that has become a staple in any deck that runs a V Pokemon and no other V-Star powers. If you put this in, you obviously were going to be running Lumineon or a Rotom. Usually those were your choices. Maybe if you're running a Rangaroo, probably running the other two. But this thing, for the longest time when it came out, was way too expensive, in my opinion. Now that it's rotating now, obviously it's going to be chump change, maybe like $1 or something. But it was a very impactful card. It's probably up there with some of the most impactful cards from the V series. And now also we have Capture Aroma, not as big as a card. Obviously Lugia used it for a while. People switch it in and out for Great Balls. But it is something we are losing. Let's move on to Pokemon Go. Obviously, the biggest thing we're losing, Pokestop. One of the best ways to get your items or discard cards you don't need. We're losing it. So like Roaring Moon, Raging Bolt, Gholdengo, I believe, also uses it. They're all losing this very good utility card. It either got you the items or put stuff into the discard you needed in the discard for those items to grab. So it's very unfortunate. There's going to be other ways, obviously, people are going to find to discard to their discard. The only thing I could think of was Pokemon Go's Pokestop. Maybe there's other things, but other than that, that's probably the best thing from that set. And then Crown Zenith was literally just reprints. There's not a single trainer card that I can think of from there that was not a reprint. Maybe there is, but I couldn't remember it for the life of me. It's all that comes back to me is just reprints of all the other cards I just talked about. Now, this is probably one of the shortest parts of it, and obviously energy cards are a huge thing. The biggest one we're losing, in my opinion, of these three you're seeing right now is the Double Turbo Energy. That thing pretty much powered up your Pokemon instantly if it used 2 energies of any color. So, bye-bye Klawf. I'm sorry, I think Klawf is gonna have a really bad struggle right now because it is not gonna have Double Turbo Energy. You have to power that up in 2 turns now. Maybe you can use Crispin, I guess, but then why not just use something better like a Terrestrial deck where you're using like Pikachu, an Ogerpon, and a Terapagos EX. Either way, if you want to use Klawf, probably look into using Crispin instead. And then we're also losing from Lost Origins the Gift Energy, which, I'll be honest, I think the biggest loser of this is a couple of Klawf lists and mostly Lugia. It's obviously to get cards into your hand, so, and I guess if you wanted to power up your Cincino, There's also V-Guard energy, but that is kind of useless. There's just like no V Pokemon that really attack in this current meta. So it's just kind of useless at the moment. Maybe if you were using Lugia V-Star to attack with, but then like, why do you even have the Cinccino's and the Regigigas in your deck? Anyways, let's just move on to the next one. The only thing we're really losing here is double turbo energy, but I had to mention something else, or else this slide would literally just be double turbo energy. But obviously we're not losing everything. We are keeping a couple cards just because they have reprints in the current Scarlet and Violet series. So notable supporters, obviously Boss's Orders and Professor's Research. They all got reprinted, so you don't have to worry about those. If you need to get new ones, which they're probably cheap anyways, but you can use the old ones, so that's fine. And now item cards, we got Great Ball, Ultra Ball, Switch, Rare Candy, Energy Retrieval, and Energy Switch, just to name a few. There's a bunch of other ones, but these are probably the most impactful that if you're worried about losing, don't worry, they're still usable, even if the regulation mark on the bottom is not the right one. Now, when those early Scarlet and Violet sets do rotate out, then you might have to worry. But for now, it's actually kind of interesting. We're seeing like things like Ultra Ball so close together getting reprinted. So maybe even the next one we might get an Ultra Ball reprint. I don't know, we'll see. But now Poketools, the only thing we're getting to keep, which honestly is the dumbest thing ever, is Choice Belt. Choice Belt. The thing that helps you do more damage to V Pokemon, which are rotating out. Okay, so I actually had to look at my screen again because that thing, the new one, the Choice Belt from Scarlet and Violet base set, has a G regulation mark. Why? Creatures, why? Why did we get that reprinted? We had Crown Zenith. It was close enough to the beginning of Scarlet and Violet that we didn't need to get that reprinted. That just makes no sense to me. My rule of thumb when it comes to some of these cards, especially trainer cards, item cards, and Poketools, is to keep a couple of them in case they do get reprinted. You don't have to worry about pulling those cards, especially if you got some nice ones. If you got some nice, gold item cards or gold energy, or just gold something, or full arts, I would be very hesitant about the supporters. Sometimes the supporters are very specific to the era, so probably not supporters, but a lot of those item cards do get reprinted, so it might be best to hold on to those. I don't think we usually get reprinted energy, but I would highly recommend keeping some of those gold item cards. Actually, before we go on that note that I just said, keep those item cards, keep the item cards that are more universal. So like the Ultra Ball, the Nest Ball, the Quick Ball that is no longer in rotation, but I still actually have some gold Quick Balls still, because those all read very universal. Like, I think we've had Quick Balls in the past, we've had Nest Balls in the past, we've obviously had Ultra Balls in the past that get reprinted. So a lot of the item cards that don't say like, oh, gets GX Pokemon, gets V Pokemon, gets EX Pokemon, those probably not going to get reprinted. Maybe they get an errata and then their ruling or their effect gets essentially retconned into the new version, but most of the time it's better to just, if it doesn't say anything specific to the era, it's good to keep as something that will come back later.
So full disclosure, this portion of the video is going to be a lot of example decks for the current meta and how we can adjust them to the cards that will go forward, moving forward. A lot of it doesn't use anything from Journey Together because there's not a lot of cards coming out of it that really spoke to me when I was making these. But hopefully these example decks make your gears turn so you can maybe adjust them moving forward.
Okay, so let's talk about Charizard EX. Now, it is losing quite a few Pokemon that seem very important to it. It could probably survive without them, but it is going to struggle in the beginning while it tries to get up on its feet and find a new style of playing. Now, it's losing things like Rotom, Lumineon, Radiant Charizard, Duskull, but it's the one that was ideal to use. Now you're just going to have to use a different one. And then Manaphy. Trainer cards, you're losing 4 Sealed Stone, Hisuian Heavy Ball, Collapsed Stadium, and Lost Vacuum. Some really important cards in my opinion, like especially the Rotom B and the Lumineon were like really important. Plus obviously the 4 Sealed Stone to go with them. Those like helped you either draw into some good cards towards the end of your like your first or second turn, or grab the supporter you needed, or obviously the 4 Sealed Stone lets you grab whatever you needed at the time. Maybe you needed to grab that Pidgeot V or EX, or maybe that rare candy to set up your combo. Now you just can't. So you have to find new ways to do that. So it's going to struggle quite a bit. I think it's probably one of those few like major meta decks that might struggle the most out of all these other ones I'm going to talk about. So this is what Charizard EX is going to look like in post-rotation. Again, this is just an example, and all these other examples are just going to be kind of speculation and built off of what we're seeing coming out of Japan, who are already in technically post-rotation. So they got hit with it before we did. So we're seeing some of these decks come out. Obviously, once they go out towards the rest of the world, we'll see some more creativity. But as it stands, this honestly seems like a good idea. We did lose Lumineon, Rotom, 4 Sealed Stone, which were all utilities to get cards sooner than later. And instead of using those cards, now the Japanese players have decided to go with Noctowl as their search engine. I have seen some lists that use the Dunsparce as a draw engine, but just being able to get the cards you actually need when you need them using Noctowl is way more better than just hoping you draw into them. So I think using Noctowl, and obviously you need the Rotom and Rotom, so Rotom is back, but in a different form. And then the Terapagos, obviously to set up with the Noctowl, you need a basic Pokemon, and if you don't have the rare candies to go to the Charizard EX, Terapagos is your close, but next best thing. So that's what they're going to be doing now for post-rotation for Charizard EX. Of course, since you're adding the Terapagos, probably the best idea to add the Air-Zero Underdips. You have more chances to put more Noctowls onto the field, and obviously Terra Orb to grab that Terapagos a lot sooner. So I think this is honestly a good list for Charizard EX. So if you end up building that, or you have it already built out, this is probably a good way to set it up. And you'll see that for a lot of the examples. It's a good basis. Obviously, like I said before, Japan are the first ones to get this post-rotation hit, and we're seeing what they're coming up with really. And I'm sure a lot of people in other countries are already starting to look and see how we build this out. So these are a lot of examples from Japanese Fukuoka and a lot of their tournaments going out over there that have already started using post-rotation. Now, Gardevoir EX is in a really tough spot in my opinion, because it's losing a lot of its discard ability. You had Refinement, you had Radiant Greninja if you really needed it, and then obviously the better routes, and then you had Hisuian Heavy Ball if you needed to grab something like that routes, or your Drifblim or your Screamtail if it got prized. But now it's missing, specifically I think the biggest thing it's losing is the Kirlia. The Kirlia with Refinement really made this deck play well, putting those energy into the discard and then going ahead and pulling them up and throwing them onto your Drifblim or your Screamtail or whatever it may be. Maybe you were running Cresselia at this point still. It was there, and it was one of the most helpful cards. You discard, you draw 2 cards, and then maybe you had like 3 Kirlia on the field, turn one into a Gardevoir. It was perfect. It's gonna struggle a lot. I'm interested to see if maybe other cards pick up the slack now that we're missing this Kirlia. Now, Gardevoir EX, like I said, it's losing its major draw engine. And I feel like a lot of the lists we're gonna be seeing are gonna just they're really just going to try and throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Right now, it seems like the best thing to do is, just for posterity's sake, they're adding in Lily's Clefairy to deal with more of the dragon types, like a Raging Bolt, EX, and also do a bit more damage. It does have it's a new option with its, I think it's called Full Rondo for its attack, 20 plus however many bench Pokemon you have. And then we have Tatsugiri for Draw Engine, Pheasantipity, and we sometimes see Muse, not as much, but now we have Mew EX in there as well as a Draw Engine, just because we've lost Kirlia. And that does mean they also lowered the amount of Kirlias you're running. You usually wouldn't want to run like 3 or 4. Now you're just running 2. So that does give you an extra bit of space to work with, adding in new cards. Brilliant Blender is an interesting choice, but it is a good way to get those energy cards into the discard for your Gardevoir to use. Honestly, this is probably one of those lists or decks that is going to get hit really hard, and it's going to take a lot of time to recover, because that Kirlia engine with the refinement really made that deck a thing to be reckoned with. And I really want to say it, but they took a long time to play. Gardevoir EXs, as you know, they take a long time to play out their turns. So while Dragapult is really losing quite a few cards, like Radiant Charizard, Radiant Alakazam if it was using that, Lumineon, or Duskull, the obviously ideal one, Forest Sealed Stone. I think sometimes they used Rotom, not as much as Lumineon, I think, but Forest Sealed Stone, Lance, because they're Dragon-type Pokemon, and then Temple Sinnoh because it didn't really use any special energy, so you could just make it like a default. So other decks that do use it couldn't really do much. But I think even though it's losing all these cards, I think it's going to survive quite well. If you think about it, it still has a good draw engine. You can put in Pidgeot. The Drakeloads do pretty well. And we'll see in a second what I mean. Now, we've seen inklings about Dragapult EX and how we would kind of play it for post-rotation, because they've already started switching over to getting away from really the Pidgeot EX reliance. So sometimes we'd only see like a 1-1 line, maybe a 2-2 line, because the Drakeloak was more than enough. It's already a draw engine in itself in that line. And losing things like Lumineon and maybe sometimes Rotom with a Forest Sealed Stone doesn't matter too much to it. You can just add in like Sparkling Crystal so you don't have to worry about the extra energy. Essentially now you can add in more Dusclops and Dusknoirs too if you need to get those damage out. And the Badoo really helps with, you know, stalling out, just waiting for your items to get into your hand that you need. So running 2 of them just makes sense. Put up the Badoo, stall for maybe a turn or 2 while your opponent can't really set up. Maybe they'll get the knockout on the Badoo, but I mean, at least you'll get a few turns of them not playing any item cards if they can't set up because they're missing those things. They can't use it because of Badoo. It may struggle a bit in the beginning, but I think Dragapult is set to just do fine after post-rotation as it stands. So Miraidon is losing Raichu, Raikou, Lumineon V, Zapdos, Forest Sealed Stone, and Switch cards. All very important cards, especially the Raikou and the Raichu, and Zapdos, which all kind of help the deck prevail, especially if you see the most recent regionals and special events. It has done very well. But losing these cards, I think, are going to put it in a very bad spot. There's hard ways to replace, especially Raichu V's like really high damage output, and Raikou V's like versatility, because you could put so much more damage on Raikou now because you had Area Zero's Underdepths and the Pikachu EX. Losing that now as like an easy 2 energy attacker might cause some issues, but I think, as we'll see, it might still do pretty well. So Miraidon EX is losing like I said, Raichu and Raikou. But this list right here seems like it's, again, one of those decks that's just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks. Like, we now are attacking with Pikachu EX, which sometimes you really wouldn't have seen previously. And they added in the Galvantula EX and the new Tapu Koko EX that's coming out. The Tapu Koko is an interesting choice though. It's 60 plus 20 damage for each benched Pokemon. So if you have your Area Zero Underdepth set up, it can be set up to do a lot of damage for 2 energy. So I mean, it's a good, weird like replacement for Raikou, but it doesn't have that draw ability that Raikou did. So I'm concerned that this might not do well post rotation. Miraidon's lost some of its like really high hitting attackers. It does now have to rely on Pikachu EX to hit that 300. But I mean, there's a chance that this could do well in like formats or in places where you don't see things that are easily knocking out basic EX Pokemon and maybe aren't running Girafarig EX and Melodic EX. Will just stop this completely, as we kind of saw in Fukuoka. Just FYI, keep an eye out for Melodic EX Girafarig, because that thing is scary. It essentially just stops any damage coming to you. Keep an eye out for a video for that maybe later. Look, I don't want to say this is probably one of the decks that like won't get phased at all, but Archaludon EX is only losing Radiant Greninja, which isn't that important, and then Dialga V and V-Star, which again isn't that important. It's doing Heavy Ball, which is kind of important, Pokestop, which isn't that important, and then Trekking Shoes, which aren't that important. I think Archaludon is probably one of those decks, if you have it currently built and you're using it, if you're worried about like, what do I play post-rotation, this might be the deck to stick with for a while until you find something you might be more comfortable with. So, I mean, Archaludon EX is pretty okay. I mean, there's not much going on here that's like really innovative post-rotation. Like Hop's Zacian EX is in here now. An extra 20 damage on its attack instead of Archaludon EX. The Black Belts, I think we're kind of getting thrown in now for Prismatic Evolution's version, just for the extra 40 damage. So it makes that Archaludon hit harder, it makes the Zacian hit harder. But overall, it's really just Archaludon EX still. I don't know what to say. This thing kind of just survived post-rotation pretty well overall. Again, Archaludon EX players right now, they're eating fine. I don't know what to do. They're just like really fine. I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's losing quite a few cards that make it what it is. It's losing Radiant Hisuian Sneasler. It's losing Electrode V, Lumineon, Oranguru, as it was using more recently. Oh man, double turbo energy. I can't wrap my head around like, how do you get past the double turbo energy and the extra damage you would get from Radiant Hisuian Sneasler and the easy knockouts from Electrode. You're also losing like 4 Siltstone, Switch Cart, and Hisuian Heavy Ball. These are all really important cards for this deck. I'm concerned about how you set this up post-rotation. I'm hoping that this example I show like kind of gets people's ideas going. Like, how do we help Klawf survive? Because it is one of those decks that I do like. It's a comfort deck. It's a very fun comfort deck, but I'm concerned it's not going to do well post-rotation. So my biggest concern with Klawf was that like it's losing DTE. And now that I'm looking at it, it just doesn't feel like Klawf anymore. Like, I've looked for multiple lists from Japan, and I feel like they've just kind of dropped Klawf in general. Like, this doesn't really feel like Klawf anymore. Like, you can see up there, right? It says 1 Klawf. I couldn't find any other lists that use more than that. I mean, you could probably get rid of some stuff and add more Klawfs in, but as the deck plays now, it really needs to set up the energy in a different form. And Honestly, you could probably, if you're gonna set up other energy, you might as well include other Pokemon that use those energy. So it makes perfect sense to add in like Terrapagos, Ogerpon, the Ursaluna. The Volcanion's an interesting choice, but it's a good one because that's how Klawf does extra damage. To switch that out afterwards. The Volcanion, honestly, the burn on it is very interesting. For a Pokemon that didn't have a lot of distribution in the main staple games, it has been a very good competitive like TCG card for some reason. I don't know why. Like this TCG card, hopefully they bring it back for Pokemon Legends EA, because I would love to get Volcanion to see some like limelight in maybe VGC somehow. I don't know. I think it's a mythical, so it technically isn't allowed. I don't know. I don't know how that works. But anyways, Klawf. It's okay. I don't think it survives really well. It doesn't really feel like Klawf anymore. I think it's going to be one of those decks that just kind of falls off like really slowly. Oh man, so Raging Bolt EX. This is one of those cards that like, it has a high damage ceiling, right? But because of how much it's losing, it's only losing Radiant Greninja, by the way, for Pokemon, but like the trainer cards it's losing, the Hisuian Heavy Ball, Lost Vacuum, Pokestop, Switch Card, Trekking Shoes, specifically Trekking Shoes and the Pokestop. Those are the biggest ones it's losing, because that helped it put stuff into the discard for Sada to then power up its Pokemon. You still do have, your Ogerpon EX to power up the grass energy, but I think it still needed a lot from the Pokestop to grab all the items it needed. Sure, you would lose maybe a Sada or two from the Pokestop, but the item cards you would get from it were very important for the playstyle. So it's like fast playstyle is going to get slowed down quite a bit, but I'm not too concerned. I think it's one of those decks that's going to still survive pretty well. It does lose Pokestop, so getting those item cards are going to be a bit more difficult, getting the trainer cards too in general. But kind of like with Charizard EX, adding in a knocked-out engine seems to be the go-to. Honestly, I think knocked-out engine is going to be a huge hit going forward. Knocked-out, just being able to grab any 2 item cards you need. Hold on, is it trainer cards? Anyways, it's just being able to grab the 2 cards you need at any time just by evolving is just a really great thing. So I think this thing is just going to be set to do really well. Again, it has a high damage ceiling, so it's going to knock out things easily. So maybe Lily's Clefairy is going to have a big impact for these Raging Bolts, just because it's going to now be weak to Psychic. We'll see. Honestly, this is a good deck if you're just trying to find something simple and easy to play. This might be it. Okay, so I think Gholdengo is in one of those spots, kind of like Archaludon. And I don't know if it's like a steel type thing, but losing Palkia, Radiant Greninja, and Manaphy might not be an issue. But things like the Irida that helped grab the items on the Palkia, Hisuian Heavy Ball, canceling Cologne, I completely forgot to put Pokestop on this, but obviously you can see Pokestop there. That's another card. I think Pokestop might be the bigger loss for Gholdengo, more than anything else. Because Pokestop would let you get your superior energy retrievals or your regular energy retrievals, and then go ahead and do high damage and rinse and repeat by maybe discarding another superior energy retrieval, putting it into your hand because of Pokestop, and then just doing the whole combo again. It has one of those high damage ceilings that I think will allow it to do well post-rotation. We'll see if this example maybe resonates with a couple of you, and maybe you'll see, yes, it's still going to be very viable. So Gholdengo losing Palkia is actually not the biggest deal, because it really just relied, again, similar to Raging Bolt, it needed to get its resources sooner than later. Like as soon as it could get them, that's when it's going to start doing damage and setting up really well. So it needs a good draw engine. I've seen a lot of lists come out of Japan, especially the Champions League, that use Dunsparce out of all things. And that's probably because there's not a lot of good like Terra Pokemon that are Steel Terra. There's no other like good card. But because of that, because you want to draw a lot of things, Energy Search Pro has become a thing for this deck, and you use that instead to discard, which is very weird, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter as long as you get all the energy. Gholdengo does not care what energy type it is. It'll just, whatever you discard, as long as it's energy. So, Energy Search Pro, the Dunsparce for draw support, very interesting choice, but I think I really like it. And again, the new card in this deck, as you can kind of see, it's Lavinica. It's going to be interesting. Lavinica will probably help a lot because it's adding basic energy into your hand. I forget if the stipulation is it needs to be different types. I will put it on the screen if it is, but if not, still 2 energies back in your hand. That's at least 2 energies you can, again, discard back for damage on this Gholdengo. It's going to be a really good high ceiling damage deck that we're going to see probably do really well in this early stage of post rotation. Now, obviously, when there are all these cards getting lost, there are cards or meta decks that will just essentially disappear. They're gone. They will no longer exist because the deck's main card is gone. Obviously, I'm talking about Regidrago, Lugia V-Star, Snorlax Stall, B, and a Lost Zone. Those are all just gone, wiped. We will never see any more of those in the meta post-rotation. So it's unfortunate. I really liked Regidrago. It was one of those decks, like, I was glad it was doing so well now. The only thing I'm happy for this, like, loss is obviously Snorlax. I genuinely don't like Snorlax Stall. I hate it that it was a thing. I'm glad it's now gone. And if they reprint something that stalls again, I swear, I swear. So you're probably thinking to yourself, what now? What do I do now that I know all this information? Do I go out and, buy all these cards for the examples I showed? Instead, what you can do is buy just TCG products that are already set up to help you for post-rotation. So we have obviously the Charizard EX League Battle Deck, which, hold on, I have right here. This thing, I still have not opened it. I was going to make a video on it. I probably won't. But this thing is set for post-rotation. All the cards that come in it are all legal post-rotation. I don't think there's a single card in here. And as you can see on the other side of the screen, the Dragapult EX, as you can see down there, does say it releases in April. So that is the deck to get. And this one. And Trainer's Toolkit is a great essential if you're just looking for trainer cards. All those cards are great and usable for post-rotation. So you don't have to worry about any of those cards in there not being usable. I can't say the same thing for the packs that come with it. I don't remember if they're all just Scarlet and Violet. I believe they are. I do have a video out somewhere on the channel that shows it off, but I don't recall if they, for some reason, maybe put a Silver Tempest one in there. And of course, we can't forget Scarlet and Violet Journey Together. It comes out, I believe, March? Or April? I actually don't remember off the top of my head. I'll just throw it up on the screen above me. It comes out soon. And those cards are obviously all good for post-rotation. I don't remember the full list. If you want the list, you can go ahead and go to justinbasil.com, PokeBeach, or wherever you consume your Pokemon news, and go ahead and find out what the lists are in there. There's not a lot of reprints, I think. I don't think we even get any reprints. If they have shown them, maybe I just missed them. But there's obviously a lot of new cards that could be replacements for the cards that we are losing. Now, we saw a lot of these cards get used in a couple high top placing decks in the Champions League that just happened. And specifically, there was the Zoroark deck that did really well. I think as we continue into post-rotation, I think you might be okay with just building a deck out of the cards that you get from Journey Together. You might not even have to worry about a lot of the previous Pokemon maybe a couple utility Pokemon, honestly. That's probably what you're going to need. For the most part, though, a lot of the supporters and Pokemon are going to be coming from Journey Together. Those are the cards you're going to be using. Maybe you'll need some item cards from the previous sets, but you can probably get them from the Trainer's Toolkit if you really need it. So like N's Pokemon deck, Hop's Pokemon deck, and then as we go on into the next ones for Destined Rivals, and maybe if, you know, Lily's a Pokemon deck or Iono's Pokemon deck pick up, I think just getting the cards from those sets. Oh, Cynthia, that's another one. Cynthia's Pokemon deck is going to go crazy. Garchomp, I'm looking forward to it. But those in general, well, you'll be able to build them most likely with just the cards you get in those sets. Maybe get the Trainer's Toolkit, and you can just make a deck out of those. You might not even have to go as far back to build out Charizard EX, Dragapult, Raging Bolt, all those. You don't have to worry about those. Just start off in these new sets instead. This is the part of the video where I am legitimately just speculating based on like the most recent results. As you might have seen, and I'm recording this right after the Fukuoka Champions League, there were a lot of very interesting decks that came out at the top. Obviously, Feraligatr, of all things, won first place. But that's for good reasons. Because if you saw how it played, it had Monkey Dory, which to use Feraligatr, you put 5 damage counters onto it to do the extra damage for 280. But then you move that 3 damage onto something else, which effectively makes it a 310 attack towards the active if you move the damage onto that active Pokemon. It is a heavy hitter. No one really expected that kind of playstyle, but that is exactly what I'm expecting to do really well post-rotation. Heavy hitters, things that have a high damage ceiling. Things like Dragapult, while it only does 200 damage, that extra 60 it's doing to the bench as a spread or just straight onto one Pokemon is going to do a lot of extra damage and needs to get those high knockouts. Raging Bolt EX already has a high damage ceiling. It's losing a lot of things, but I think its damage ceiling is still going to be pretty high that it won't need to worry about that. Same thing with Gholdengo, high damage ceiling. It's dependent on energy it discards. Very easy to power up and hit high damage. Charizard EX, obviously its high damage is dependent on the flow of the game, but if you can master that right now, or if you've already mastered it, you're probably set. You can probably just continue to use Charizard EX if you'd like to, post-rotation. But again, I think these heavy hitters that can easily get to that high damage are going to be the decks we're going to see in the meta post-rotation. We might see some trickles of maybe N's Zoroark, maybe the Lily's Clefairy is going to show up in a Gardevoir EX deck or something. Maybe when Destin's Rivals comes out, we'll get surprised by Ethan's Pokemon or Cynthia. Cynthia's Garchomp looks scary. Trust me. If you thought it was scary in the games, you don't even want to know about the card. Oh, and I completely forgot about Hop. Honestly, most people would forget about Hop. But Hop's Zacian, that whole Hop's Pokemon deck, is set to do really well, kind of like the old Zacian V. I will say we haven't seen a lot of good results from it, but it is still in infancy over in Japan, so maybe once it comes overseas to everywhere else, maybe it'll do well. Only time will tell, but my prediction is all these heavy hitter decks that can easily set up damage are going to be the ones that are going to be just dominating the meta for quite a while in the beginning, once people find out like the rhythm of this new post-rotation format. So that was pretty much everything you needed to know about rotation this year. I hopefully answered a lot of the questions or concerns or, anything that might have been on your mind about post-rotation. Hopefully I covered everything. If I didn't, let me know down in the comments any questions or comments you might have about what I talked about in this video. Also, let me know what you think about this format. It's a little weird. I am just in front of a green screen and talking as I'm looking at one of my monitors for what is just a PowerPoint. I'm literally just talking. I made a PowerPoint for this. This is the first time I've done this for a video, so I don't know how it's gonna do. But Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you found this informational. That's all I care about. If you found this informational, go ahead and leave a like. Again, comment down below if you have any more questions. And if you did enjoy this content, definitely get subscribed. I think I might be doing a couple more videos in this sort of style. I kind of like the green screen. I honestly should be using this thing more often. Anyways, as always, guys, stay safe, and thanks for watching. And that is my TED Talk on post-rotation.